I've become the Udemy Master. I've done this course, this course, this course, this course. Nothing can stop me.
Time to make my very own game. Let's go. Wait a minute. Wait a second. I don't know what I'm doing. This can't be. No! Ah! But the courses. So many courses. So many lessons. It doesn't make any sense. Come back to 2021, I'd been following Blender and Unity courses for quite some time, but never really retaining the information as well as I would have liked. But then Unreal Engine 5 gets announced, and I see the trailer for Lumen and for Nanite, and it just seems really cool. So I decide, you know what? I'm gonna jump ship. Friendship ended with Unity.
Now I'm known as my best friend.
So I jump ship. There's no reason to stick with Unity because I don't understand it well enough to be tied to it. So I decide to learn C++. And that was really hard. I followed this course by Stephen Ulibarri, and while it was great, there just became one point in it where the project completely broke, and I just couldn't find a way to fix it. And I mean, I spent quite a few hours trying to fix it, but it just wasn't happening. That's when I found this course, also by Stephen Ulibarri, C++ Fundamentals, and that was the course I needed. It seemed like the perfect course for me to level up my coding chops, and that's when I had a great idea. I know, no need to applaud. Truly breathtaking, that one. Not only did I take notes, however, I wrote my own little cheat sheet, so here I was, a fresh-faced C++ coder. Figuratively, not literally. I mean, look at this. Now I wouldn't call that fresh-faced, would you? Then I think, what kind of game can I make in the terminal? Can you even make a game in the terminal? And that's when it hit me. I can't believe I found it. Book game. Finally. Now you may be asking yourselves, what exactly is the book game? Well, in my mind, the book game is one of those classic choose-your-own-adventure games. Now, for those of you who don't know what the choose-your-own-adventure books are, they're a series of books where you would have to read through it, and at certain points you would have to make a choice. When you make that choice, you would then have to flick ahead to that section of the book. Now I wanted to do something similar to that, but in the terminal. Now, with the skills I needed and an idea in mind, me little fingies, we got to work. After creating the project, I decided to try and capture textual input from the player. This is how it went. If that doesn't tell you I don't know what I'm doing, I really don't know what will. Luckily though, I had my little cheat sheet, so I was able to quickly figure out that I forgot to use the hashtag include. Oh my god,
this is so me when I forget to use hashtag include.
So after fixing that problem, we ended up with this little piece of code, which lets us do this. It's really nothing noteworthy, but to me it was the first hurdle that we had just overcome, and it gave me hope that I actually had remembered something at least. So I made a new CPP file for the system, and renamed the not source file to the player files. Within these files I created two public classes, one for the player and one for the system. I plan to store all the variables and functions for things like player health and if the player has taken damage within the player class. This would allow me to access it in the system files. After creating the classes, I made a function for difficulty selection, which loops back until the player enters one of the given difficulties. After that I tidied up the player class, and moved the code for giving the player a name into its own function. And that's when I run into this issue. This one took quite a while to fix, because I wasn't really entirely sure what the actual cause was. I went on a massive detour to do with pointers, because that's the one thing I really don't understand still. Ended up figuring out that this little function was all I needed, along with a reference to the player class in the system. Next on the agenda was to make a way to store the name that the player enters. I wanted your name to be repeated back to you when certain characters talk to you directly, just to make the game feel a bit more personal, kind of like how it was in Pokemon. So for that purpose, I ended up with this function. After completing this, I bundled that function as well as a difficulty selection function into another function called setup. I just did this once again to make things a bit more tidy. While creating everything I'd made so far, I'd realised there was one major issue with the terminal, and it really needed to be addressed if this game was actually going to be enjoyable for anyone to play. You see, the terminal is just designed to run through its code and then close itself. In the context of this game, the text would only stop scrolling if I'd made a choice for the player to make. The terminal will pause while the player needs to enter some text. With this in mind, I wanted to create a function that would pause the game until the player had pressed the enter key a single time, until it continued until the next time I'd entered this function. I thought this would be a great way to break up the text into readable chunks for the player. Unfortunately, my first attempt was a complete failure. Not only did the player need to press the enter key twice, I found that after the player had made a choice, the function just wouldn't work at all. Now, while pressing the enter key twice doesn't seem like that big of a deal, I knew it'd become annoying for the player over the course of the game, as it was annoying for me within just a couple of minutes. I didn't have time to address this issue on day 1, however, and had to call it quits there. So on day 2 I set out for a solution to this problem. It took a long time to figure out what the actual answer was. Turns out the sin command, the way I was using for the player to enter text, has a cache. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, but I knew it was a blockade that I needed to deal with. So after even more frantic googling, I finally found a couple of commands that would allow me to clear the cache. When using sin.clear and sin.ignore in combination, this would fix my problem. What was even better was that I found out if I set the sin.ignore to 0, then I'd only have to press the enter key once. So I'd actually fixed every problem with this function, and that was amazing. Next then, choices. I had to figure out a way for the player to actually make choices. This is the framework I settled on. I tried several options but ended up with an if-else statement embedded in a do-while loop. I know for larger scale projects switch statements are more efficient, but I didn't plan on having more than 4 choices at a single given time, so I figured using if-else statements would be quite fine. I made it so that the player had to enter the exact text of the choice, otherwise the do-while loop would loop back on itself and the player would have to enter the choice again. Lastly, I added a function to deal damage to the player. It looks a little like this. Now I had what I believed to be the foundational functions of the game. All I needed to do now was write the text for the game. This was the part I seriously underestimated the most. You see, when I started this project, I thought it'd only take about 2 weeks to complete. But little did I know, writing an entire story for a game takes quite a long time. I spent about a week or so just coming up with ideas for the game while typing them out, but never really having a proper direction for the game. So I decided just to stop and create a brief story overview for the game. So I had an idea of the general direction that I wanted to go in. It was nothing crazy, but it looked a little like this. It may not seem like that long of a story, but that's because I only wanted the game to be about 15 minutes, extendable through the replayability of the choices. Now that I had an idea of the story that I wanted to write, I continued writing. This sped up the process substantially, but the keen-eyed viewers among you may have noticed in the earlier clips that I started this project back in December, and it's now July. In reality, I finished this project back in June, but it still took a lot longer than I anticipated. A big chunk of the time not spent working on the game was due to more important things happening in real life. However, a lot of time was wasted due to me just procrastinating in general. It's really easy to distract yourself when you're sat at your computer. Even if you're sat down to work on the game, it's still so easy just to open up the internet and start watching something on YouTube or Netflix, or opening Steam and playing a game. So, May comes around and I realise just how long the project's taken me. That's when I decided to start using a project management tool called Trello, which I'd seen in a video by the creator Danny. I ended up with a week off of work, so I decided to create a Trello board with a list of things that I thought I could reasonably complete within that week. The week ended and I ended up completing most of the things on the board. I didn't complete everything though, but some of the things were a bit harder than I thought they were going to be. So I wasn't really too disheartened, and I was actually quite happy. It's the first time I've had a week off since learning anything about game development and actually being productive for the entire week. So with newfound vigour and a productive mindset, I decided to create another Trello board with everything that I thought I would need to complete this project. At this point in the project there were no new functions to write, and any new functions would follow the format of the previous ones. I had everything in place, all I needed to do was finish the story. I managed to get as much done in the last month as I had in the entire 4 months combined, and after that, I finished the project. I will admit I did rush the end a little bit, just because I wanted to finish this and move on to the next project, but I'm quite satisfied with the ending. So allow me to show you a few minutes of gameplay. I've uploaded the game for anyone to try out in the description, but please be aware that it is just a C++ script that opens in the terminal, so I don't think anyone who isn't playing on a Windows machine could actually play the game, and I really don't know the limitations, to be perfectly honest. I'd like to give a big shout out to my friend and Twitch streamer, ChunkXD. He helped me make sure other people could actually play the game by playing a lot of broken versions of it, so I really appreciate his time and help. As for the next 2 videos, I have another project that I completed one night in a couple of hours. I plan on releasing a video of that. And for the coders out there, I plan on releasing a video where I go through the code that I've written for this game in a bit more detail. Now the code I wrote is probably quite terrible, but I thought it might be interesting for people to see how somebody approaches these problems that I overcame. And with that, I thank you very much for watching the video, and goodbye. This is Lewis, signing out.